So to get away with the recording. But
Apologies, can I just ask IT colleagues to start the recording again? Thank you.
it's quite ironic, because I was about to say I think it is important that not just the council deal with governance issues and members deal with governance issues, but we be seen to deal with governance issues. So we will now the recordings back on. Just to clarify then that in terms of the current Code of Conduct, which was revised by the Scottish Government and the Standards Commission and reissued in December 2021 in anticipation of elections, changes were made to the arrangements for the declaration of interest. I wouldn't repeat it every meeting, but I think for the benefit of this meeting, I would just clarify that it's now a three-stage test. The first test or stage of the test in terms of Section 5 of the Code is, do I have a connection? So councillors have to consider if they have a connection to the matter. A connection is any link between the matter being considered and me or a person or body I'm associated with. This could be a family relationship or a social or professional contact. A connection includes anything that I have registered as an interest, but equally it might include things that you haven't registered as an interest and don't need to. It doesn't include being a council tax or ratepayer, and I'm summarising here, it doesn't include where the council has appointed you to an outside body unless you have some other substantive conflict in that regard, and that's a connection. If under stage 2 you consider that your connection is an interest that requires to be declared because the objective test is met, and the objective test is where a member of the public with knowledge of the relevant facts would reasonably regard your connection to a particular matter as being so significant it would be considered as being likely to influence the discussion or decision making. If you feel that test is met, then under the current regime, the only option when declaring an interest is to withdraw. Members will be aware under the previous code there were then options about significant and remain, etc. But it's been clarified now and the landscape's been decluttered. So if you're declaring an interest, the only option is to withdraw from that particular matter when it's under discussion and being determined. The other alternative that is still afforded, however, is if a member believes that they don't have an interest, but believes that it's appropriate for transparency reasons to state that they have a connection, then that can be noted. Without getting into the details, 6 members have declared, I think rightly, interests in various bodies that are covered in this report, and as a consequence I would agree with their individual assessment in each case that they have an interest and they should withdraw. That's the first part, Chair. That then means we have 6 members declaring an interest and 5 members left attending and participating today. At that point, I would simply confirm that a quorum is 4, and therefore it would be competent and lawful for Cabinet to proceed to determine this, notwithstanding that a number of members are having to withdraw rightly on the proper application of the code. And that's where we're at, Chair. So it would be appropriate in terms of lawfulness and competence. 5 is above the quorum, and it's competent for Cabinet to deal with this, notwithstanding those withdrawals if Cabinet wishes to do so. That's where we're at. Thanks, Chair, members.
Thanks very much, David. Thanks very much for advice. And I was just double checking that none of my Kilmarnock Pipe Band or Spring Hill Bowling Club or any of my interests were in there. But I think we have to be this kind of rigorous. I think that this report. I mean, it's been well written. I know the officers have in terms of the assessments, the processes here have been quite rigorous, but I know that these organisations are really looking for some of the money to proceed. So I would be moving that we go to the presentation and hear the report, and any members that wish to declare an interest and not take part in the process, leave at the moment. But remember to come back because we're getting a briefing on current issues.
Here, if you can just let us know when to come back, please, that would be helpful.
Somebody come for us. Somebody will get the.
We'll contact members on Teams before the briefing, the informal briefing on the industrial action after the meeting. We'll let you know before that's called, councillors.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, David. Oh, John's there. We're getting John. Just like to look who the 5 are. So the 5 are still here. Okay, the presentation is. Blair, are you going to start it?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm delighted to welcome Claire Kavanagh to Chamber this morning to take us through the place-based investment programme paper. There's been a significant amount of work, and I'd like to express my thanks to Claire for her leadership round about this, but also to extend that to other colleagues from across council departments who were involved in the rigorous assessment to bring us with the recommendations that you see before you today. So I'll now pass you over to Claire. Thank you.
Thank you, Blair. Thanks, Chair. Good morning, members. The report is presented to you today to set out the approach to managing the place-based investment programme in 2022-23 and to make recommendations in terms of the projects to be prioritised for investment in the forthcoming year. Members, importantly, the paper also sets out a package of support outside the scope of the place-based investment programme for the projects that are not being recommended on this occasion. In terms of the background to the report, detailed in paragraphs 3 to 6, this is a 5-year Scottish Government programme that started last year and runs until 25-26. The Council manages that programme and investment through My Service, enabling local communities and businesses to identify the things that matter to them and progress projects and solutions that make a positive difference. The paper sets out the programme objectives and confirms that it is capital costs which are eligible and articulates a number of programme conditions, for example that, as a minimum, contracts must be signed by 31st of March each year. The paper describes a previous report from October 2021 where Cabinet approved last year's place-based investment projects and remitted officers to devise an application process for use, which I will go on to describe. Members, the paper is set within a strategic context described in paragraphs 7 to 12. Firstly, in terms of realising the place principle and in terms of our local strategic direction. Members will be aware that Council recently approved its strategic planning priorities for the next 5 years. And in supporting the place principle, this programme contributes across every local priority with a particular focus on building a fairer economy, improving community wellbeing and financial sustainability and ensuring resilience. Paragraphs 13 and 14 and Appendix 1 set out the year-end position from last year, bringing the required reporting for 2021-22 to a close. The detailed position has been reported to Scottish Government in line with programme monitoring conditions. Within the report, I highlight some projects that have been significantly progressed or successful, and as you can see, thank you to Robert, we are sharing images of last year's projects for you today that, against a backdrop of increasing costs and supply challenges, have made a real difference to local communities and businesses. The report details the application process and evaluation approach implemented by officers following Cabinet's instruction. You will have seen, members, that we have created a process that communities feel easily able to engage in. I would draw your attention to paragraph 16, where it's described that 95% of the applicants who provided feedback felt either positive or very positive about the application process. Members, I would ask you to note the appetite and capacity within East Ayrshire's communities to drive forward the transformation of local towns and villages, set out at paragraph 17. We received 55 applications for a total funding request, almost £3 million in excess of our available allocation. While it's therefore inevitable that not all applications can be successful, our community's vision and readiness to do this work is something we should recognise and celebrate. Paragraphs 20 to 26 set out the assessment process. In the table at paragraph 20, members will see the composition of the assessment panel at a senior level across the council, who undertook a robust process in 2 stages. In paragraph 20, 21 and 22 describe that evaluation approach and scoring process. And paragraph 23 sets out the guiding principles through which applications were prioritised to come within our local funding allocation. Members, the panel's recommendations as to the projects that should be prioritised for investment are set out at Appendix 2 of the report with you. And if I can highlight for your attention the second table at paragraph 28, this sets out that 19 or 73% of the applicant projects being recommended, this will be their first place-based investment. And again, this demonstrates the breadth and scale of community leadership for regeneration in East Ayrshire. And further, members, this paper represents over £1 million of investment in that community leadership. The panel, in using its equity principle, has sought to spread the impact of the available funding across 26 projects. And you can see at paragraph 30 the sorts of outcomes that recommended projects will contribute to. So play for children and young people, helping to recover from problems with drugs or alcohol, and providing spaces to make personal social connections. When we analyse the outputs in terms of the geography of recommended projects, we can also see the clear difference, as stated in paragraph 31, that this will make in terms of the communities that face the greatest level of inequality in terms of deprivation and poverty and experience of trauma, with 40% of projects to be delivered in 20% most deprived communities. Turning now to the applications not being recommended and the package of support being put in place for these groups. Members have already described the context of oversubscription and inevitable disappointment this would result in for some, and this has indeed been a driver for our approach, but moreover, it's our commitment to collaborative and place-based working with our communities that has meant we have gone the extra mile to put this support package in place. You will see the detail of that support outside the place-based investment programme in Appendix 3 and some examples at paragraph 34 of how we will take next steps alongside these communities, which we will bring back to Cabinet in future reports. Throughout, members, the report details that the community-led regeneration team has sought to learn systematically at all stages of the programme, and paragraphs 37 to 40 set out how this learning will shape our continuous improvement journey. Key areas going forward will be involving communities themselves in evaluation, streamlining and evolving the process to enable this, and shaping future processes in terms of following the public pound best practice, following the assurance exercise being undertaken by internal audit colleagues. Paragraphs 41 to 49 set out the implications of the report, including the use of 5% of programme resources to increase capacity for management of the programme capital projects. Also, that monitoring information will continue to be provided to Scottish Government per the programme requirements, that delegated authority to ensure full spend within the programme continues to rest with the Deputy Chief Executive Communities Economy, and that undue delay to projects constitutes a risk in terms of repayment of unused grant to Scottish Government in the event of contracts not being in place by the end of March 2023. Members, the report makes 7 recommendations set out at paragraph 2. Thank you, Chair, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks very much, Claire. Very good report. Good to see. It's quite distracting, some of the, but in a positive sense, some of the transitional makeovers that some of the shop fronts have had, and these really do make a big difference to communities. And it's good to see. Members, any comments or any questions? Could I just maybe say, I think we need to emphasise some of there's a lot of good projects below the line there that, if we can give any kind of support or, maybe come back at a future date or look at alternative sources of funding, we want to give them any encouragement we can, because that's quite transformative, some of the work that's going on here. I don't know if we need to emphasise that in the recommendations, but I think we absolutely need to do that. Members, any comments, questions? Maureen.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Claire, for a very clear presentation. Again, I think that what you have introduced here is something that is robust and something, again, that I've welcomed, the robust nature of it. I think it would have been more helpful. I acknowledge the fact that at paragraphs 21 and paragraphs 22, you have explained to us in terms of the breakdown of the percentage from 45% weighting and then 55% weighting. I think it still would have been more helpful, as I had previously suggested, if we had had as an appendix to the paper actually what the scoring matrix was. I think members would have welcomed that. I think that, you know, you're almost asking us to do an incredibly difficult job without that scoring matrix, in terms of we are in the situation without that information in front of us, and the process that clearly very senior officers and multiple heads, you know, the more brains to look at these things, always the better, have actually already gone through. So I think, you know, without having access to that and time to consider it, basically we're not really in a position to make any comment on any of the assessments that have been done. So that's just a comment that I would make. Equally, I think we've got a highly developed system across Cabinet of spokespersons with different responsibilities. So for me, you know, if I was looking to strengthen this, and I think you are looking to strengthen it going forward, one of the additions that I would want is, as well as having members of the public, because I think that is the way to strengthen it and would be welcoming of that. I also think having spokespersons actually part of the appropriate spokespersons, actually part of that scoring system, is something that again gives that more political oversight. And I think that would be something that I would certainly encourage and I would welcome if that could be done in future years going forward. Again, I note the comment that is there. I think it's at, is it at page paragraph 31, where it says 40% of the recommended projects are located in the most deprived 20% of East Ayrshire. That's absolutely, I accept that. I do have to make the bleat here, because there would be something wrong if I didn't, representing the only ward that in this year is not getting any financial awards, and last year only had a direct award of £10,000, which was very welcomed and very well spent within the community in terms of the Knock-in-Law Community Garden. I also would want to acknowledge that the support that will be there across this next year to hopefully strengthen the bids and strengthen the infrastructure that would be needed to sustain the bids that the communities have the aspiration to look for. So whilst of course I am hugely disappointed and genuinely brokenhearted for the people in my wards that haven't received funding, I am, given that this is a 5-year programme going forward and we still have 3 years to come, I am very much looking forward to next year and seeing the work to support those communities and those groups to be able to have sound applications. And this is me now putting down the serious marker in advance of next year. I will be looking for a very different set of circumstances in terms of Ward 2 allocation. And that is because Ward 2 allocation would increase the percentage of projects against the most deprived areas, which would be what we were actually seeking to do, and would further strengthen what you have actually set out that you want to achieve at paragraph 12 of building the fairer economy, improving community well-being, financial sustainability and ensuring resilience. So again, I acknowledge that projects require support to be at that stage. I hope to see across the next year that they've received that support and are therefore eligible for funding in another 12 months' time. Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. Very constructive comments. I mean, I would just add, I mean, I think we made, you know, when the paper came the last time, there, you know, in terms of it was reflected with, you know, some of the where places where the placemaking was advanced naturally. You know, there was schemes there that were developed, and I think, you know, what as I said at that time, I still think holds true. You know, because at the previous time, Kilmarnock South was in the the position that they didn't have any. There was no projects there, but thankfully I see there's one in short leads, and that's to be welcomed in this tranche. But I think, you know, in terms of, you know, we are where we are with this, but I think, you know, I think I really appreciate the professional view that officers give us here. You know, there's been no member significant or any influence in terms of the assessment programme, and I think before it comes to the cabinet or anywhere else, I think that we need to maintain that. You know, that and the merits of each project can be looked at that time, maybe with more enhanced information, you know, with the matrix and that kind of assessment, as Maureen suggests. But, you know, I wouldn't be, in terms of spokesperson, I maybe disagree in terms of that. I don't think any member at that, till it comes to cabinet, should really be sharply influencing any of the decisions here. So we can have, but if we've got more information, you know, we can have that debate here. Sorry, John, and then Neil.
I'd have to say I probably in this case agree with Maureen. I think to give it more political, you know, neutrality and everything, that at the final stage that we should have some spokespersons involved and some members, because by the time it gets to cabinet, it's too late for much debate, if you know what I mean. I don't see why, considering we have a grants committee, you know, handing out other grants and whatnot, why members would be excluded from anything to do with this. So I would think it would be better if there was, you know, at the final stage, once everything's been looked at and all the professional work's been done and the projects have all been, you know, ranked and whatnot, that at the last stage that there's, you know, some member involvement in the, just as an oversight, just to be involved. I mean, I think it's appropriate, if you know what I mean, in my opinion. But I'd like to thank everyone that's been involved so far, and thank Claire, you know, for the work and everything. So that's just my opinion, my group's opinion, to be honest.
Thanks, Neil.
Thanks very much, Chair. I suppose my worry would be if spokespersons were involved, would that mean that we would need to declare an interest in the process for those groups?
I mean, I think in terms of the principle, I think you're right. I think there's, in terms of when the paper's presented, absolutely, my view is that you know, it shouldn't have, you know, it's at that stage when it's presented to members, all 32 of us, then I think, you know, we've been entitled to have any kind of opinions expressed at that stage, and by all means have that opinion expressed at that stage. And, you know, if we want to maybe look at, as well as looking at the assessment process, if there's maybe make space for member comment on the projects, something like that, you know, before it's presented. But I think, you know, we've got to be careful in terms of the way we do the different stages to make sure that, you know, there's a kind of fairness and equity about it. David?
I mean, I think in terms of broad principles, it is for the council to determine how it wants its business to be conducted. There are a range of options that have been applied in the past. The answer to the short question before I forget is no, there wouldn't be, because it's a continuing course of activity to prepare recommendations for consideration rather than a conflict of interest between two different interests. So it wouldn't be the way it's been dealt with in the past, and it's for others perhaps, and maybe we need to take it away and take soundings and come back with a proposal as to how further rounds would be done if there's a general view on the part of members that there should be more member involvement. What I would point out is in terms of Scheme of Dells, that council has, this one sits with cabinet under the Scheme of Dells at the moment, and will do it until different. I'm not sure about overlapping with another committee. The Grants Committee exists for its devolved functions, and to actually involve one committee to make recommendations to another committee feels a bit clunky. Other ways, and I'm not buying or selling any, but other options that might need to be considered, and it's for you to tell us, would be, and we have used in the past, member officer groups, so they get set up short term. So So they would bring officers and members together to look at that, and what always comes out of that is a set of recommendations for approval by Cabinet, because they aren't given decision-making powers. So that's one vehicle. And another option, and again, I'm not particularly advocating it, it's for members to determine what you prefer. Another option, if the desire is to involve members, is always to take important decisions to full council and involve all members. So there are a range of different ways in which a greater member involvement can be accommodated if that is the will of members. And it's something that should perhaps, I think, that we take away and consider and come back from soundings with the groups, etc., and come back with something that's a fit with what members aspire to see in future rounds.
Thanks, David. I mean, I don't think we're a million miles away from it, one another. And, you know, we've also got the process, Drew's looking at local decision making as well. So I think that will have to kind of feed into feed into it as well. But maybe, Katie.
Thanks to you, Chair. I think we need some opportunity now to go offline and take stock of everything that's been said to us. We won't be all things to everybody. We'll do our best to make this as robust a process. I'm confident it's robust just now, but can we improve and make it even more kind of reflective of the communities we serve? Absolutely. So we would go and do that. And you make a very good point, Chair, that we are doing work around locality and place just now, and this would be considered through that lens. So, you know, that whole this is a place-based fund, and if our place-based arrangements become more mature as we develop that work and bring those recommendations to Cabinet, then it may be that some of that becomes folded into that in the coming year, which makes really good sense. So there's two policy areas that would come together. So, you know, I think the first thing is the process is, in my view, very much professionally as a robust process. Can we improve? Always. And this is about reflecting and serving people. And so we take everything we hear on board and within reason, and we would definitely reflect that back to members. And we're also going to ask the applicants, successful and unsuccessful, what the process felt like to them and how it would feel different, not just about managing disappointment, but how it could be improved. So if you leave us that time to do that, I'm pleased that we've got this done. We're going to get the money out into the areas. There's been a robust assessment, and we're going to start really developing here, but we'll get better and better, and we'll reflect on what we've heard and try and refine these processes so that people are comfortable that we're being reflective of the people we serve.
Okay, thanks. No, I mean, we can always improve the way we do things, and, you know, but I think in terms of where we are just now, I think this is, you know, the best approach that we can manage at this time. So I'd be therefore minded to move the recommendations as laid down. Maureen.
Right, Councillor McCann.
I'm very happy to move the recommendations as laid down, with something which captures what Katie has said and yourself, which is that we will have the opportunity to look at, accept, and I don't want to leave questions over the robustness of the process at this moment. I want to stress that I'm accepting that the process has been robust here, but that we are looking to further across the next year develop and strengthen our approach. And given that one of the things that we're asking for is for an individual and a member of staff to be in, I think we've got an opportunity for that member of staff to be in a good position to do that work, going back and forward between the applicants, back and forward to members, and look at that process overall. And I think that would be a good use of funds to actually do that and ensure what we have got is, because what we all want is we want buy-in from all 32 of us to this process.
Well, I mean, that's the point I was trying to get across, was we want input from, you know, all the local members and all the local communities. So we'll incorporate that we'll go and look at that as we can have something that refers to that within the, yeah. Sorry, John, before I bring in Katie.
No, I'm just saying I'm more than happy to go with the report and the recommendations. And again, thank you for everyone involved in what's been done.
Thanks, John. But just to, as Maureen says, I think that'd be helpful just to strengthen recommendations. Katie, your suggestion?
Yeah, through you, Chair. I think recommendation 3 would be the place to do that, where we're including the learning which will inform future years, and then we would say taking into account the views that we've heard from elected members, from Cabinet, but also from applicants and communities, and then we would bring that back. If that satisfies Maureen, we can add that in.
I think that would be grand. Thank you. We can do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally agree to that. Okay, I think we're unanimous on that. Okay, we agree. Okay. If I can get the other members of the cabinet back in just for a brief summary of where we are, and anybody else, Ellen, you're welcome to stay as well, just to where we are with it. Right. I think Barry's there. Just
Can I just ask if IT colleagues could stop the recording, please? Thank you.